Okay, what is PerTitle encoding? PerTitle encoding is when an encoding tool performs an evaluation on a file before it encodes it, and during that evaluation it figures out how hard the video file is to compress. Once it does that, it customizes the encoding ladder depending upon the complexity. So if you have a hard to compress file, it can increase the data rate over a fixed bitrate ladder. If you have an easier to compress file, it can reduce the data rate of that file as compared to the fixed bitrate ladder. Okay, how does PerTitle encoding work? Technically what happens is, to evaluate the complexity of the file, the encoder runs a CRF encode of the file, constant rate factor encode using the X.264 codec, and calculates the data rate of the file. And from that data rate, it can tell whether the file is easy to compress or hard to compress. The first adjustment you can make is the amount of time over which the encoder calculates the maximum encoding complexity. So it's running the CRF encode, and you can say, look at the hardest to encode 10 seconds, and if the data rate there is very high, it's going to adjust the encoding ladder up because you have a very hard 10-second sequence in the video. Problem is, every video has one 10-second sequence that's going to be hard to encode. If you can also set it at 2 minutes, say, and then you probably have a more representative sample of the amount of motion in the entire video itself, though you may have 5 or 10 seconds in the video that don't look quite as good because you're not adjusting the encoding complexity based upon the 10 seconds of high action. You're encoding it based upon the 120 seconds of average action in the video. So the first choice you make is the length of time over which the encoder measures complexity, and you can make that whatever duration you want. If it's short, then you're very conservative. If it's longer, then it's more aggressive. The second adjustment you make is to the actual encoding ladder itself. So in the encoder, you create an encoding ladder just like you do in any encoder. And what happens with the PerTitle tool is that it does its evaluation and then adjusts the steps in the ladder up or down based upon that finding. So, say your fixed encoding ladder stops at 5 megabits per second for a 1080p file. You would say, okay, whatever period of time you do your average measurement for the CRF encode, if it's over 7 megabits per second, I want you to multiply the entire encoding ladder by 1.5%. So that would push the 5 megabit top encode for 1080p video to 7.5 megabits per second. And you could also say I want every step in the encoding ladder adjusted by that amount. Suppose the toughest component of the video, again, whatever period of time you set, is 2.5 megabits per second in the CRF encode. You could also say, okay, I want to reduce the data rate of the fixed bitrate ladder by 50%. Or you could make any combination or any customization of that routine. You could say, I never want to reduce the bitrate. You could be very conservative and say, I'll pay the money, I just never want to have bad quality. And if the bitrate goes up during the evaluation period, I want to push the bitrate of all encoding rungs higher, but never go lower. Or you could take the reverse approach, where you could customize the approach for each rung in the encoding ladder. So would I recommend Cambria FTC to other users? Definitely. It's the only tool I've seen that has PerTitle encoding. 6 months after I wrote about it, it's still the only tool. It worked very well in the tests that I performed in terms of quality. It was very easy to use, and performance seemed pretty good overall, although I didn't benchmark it against any other software programs. I came across the software as a consultant for a company and worked with Capella, in a consulting relationship, not as a product reviewer. I still found the company very responsive to the suggestions that I made. And I would make a suggestion or two, and 1 or 2 weeks later, I would see the suggestion implemented in the software itself. It's probably going to change as the company gets bigger and has more customers, but overall their staff is responsive, friendly, they listen, and they're very, very helpful. So you got good software, you get good help from the company. It's definitely a product I would consider if I was buying an enterprise level encoder.